Hey everyone, Jay here. Just a quick heads up that until the end of this month, we are offering a 50% discount on all of my on-demand videos. Both my online workshop, Gentle is the New Advanced, and my Essential Practice Sequence videos. So if you have considered getting them in the past and haven't, or want to get them for someone else, now is a great time to do it. Just go to jbrownyoga.com and use promo code November50. That's jbrownyoga.com, promo code November50, and you can get 50% off any of my on-demand stuff. Okay? Okay, on to the show. All right, fellow humans, here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Welcome to you, whoever you are. New person, returning listener. I appreciate you. I appreciate that you are listening. And I'm hoping that you're doing okay. I'm hoping you're having an easier go of it than I have been of late. It seems like ever since I got back from that trip to Europe that I was talking about here on this show last month, it's been like one sucker punch after the next. It's just been hard going. I feel like there were times in the last few weeks where I felt that my faith was shaken and I found myself overwhelmed by fear. And it's not like I lived there for a very long time. I'm happy to say thanks be. But I definitely had my moments, and there'd be like, some stretches of time where it got away from me because it's just hard. Sometimes it feels really hard. So I've really been reflecting on what it is that helps me meet that challenge of when I feel shaken in that way. And certainly, like my personal practice and the classes that I facilitate, like my teaching is absolutely a way to also help me in these matters. And like a few weeks ago when I was in the forest with all y'all, like that kind of discipline to do things with myself that key me into a certain awe and wonder of life, regardless of all the other stressors and pains and difficulties. That certainly is a big part of managing it. And that is really what my yoga practice is about these days. It's about my perception of things, the experience I'm having of this life that's taking place, and the breathing and moving, whatever breathing and moving I'm doing, or whatever meditation sort of rituals or practices in some way are looking to facilitate a certain kind of sensitivity and awareness in myself so that I can better meet the situation. I can better process all the things that come up in me, and I can recognize that I've been overwhelmed by fear and not let it completely take over my whole life, but have the counterbalance, the feeling of knowing and of being supported and loved in life. Even when there's so much about it that seems so anti-human, anti-well-being, and anti-people living in a way that feels holy. And I've been talking a lot about this in terms of what is the most appropriate role for yoga teachers to be playing these days. Like, do we really need yoga to be another form of fitness. I mean, again, I'm not trying to piss people off. And if yoga's your fitness, hey, power to you. I'm not trying to take anything away from anybody, but I'm just saying, is there more that yoga might have to offer us? And if you were here last week, there's good reason to call into question a lot of what people have said about yoga and the claims that people have made about it and where it comes from. If you want to go back and listen to my episode with Philip DeSlip about Yogi Bhajan and 3HO and the reckoning that I think so many of us have had to go through. At the same time, we have experiences that we are observing, and we have many years of those experiences that we've observed in a lot of cases. So even though a lot of what we were told might have been bullshit, it doesn't take away, it doesn't erase the direct observable experiences that we've had. And so finding ways to delve into that and to yoga practice that is about that is what I'm most interested in these days, and is not that easy. There's not like a lot of people I know I can really totally go there with. But today's guest, John Stirk, is one of those people. And I will say we had a little bit of trouble scheduling because of daylight savings time was happening here and not there. We had some time zone difficulties, and then we finally made it happen. And right the day before we ended up recording this, like I had a terrible day. Some really messed up stuff happened, and I was really not in a good way. And I considered canceling, but I didn't. And I was glad that I didn't, because John was able to he was somebody I felt like I could go there with, and it was fitting given the nature of what we were exploring. So I'm so glad that I had this chance to coincide with John again. And I hope in sharing it with you today that others might get something out of it as well. Real quick, before we get to that, let me just mention that if you do want to come work through some of this together, if you want to come have some simple breathing and moving practice with me, or you want to be in discussion with people about stuff like this, or you want to get access to the full-length archives of this show and support this show, all the stuff that I'm doing can be found at jbrownyoga.com. All right, y'all. I'm just going to leave it there. I will touch base with you on the other side, but let's go ahead, get into this. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with John Stirk. Hello, John. Are you there?
I'm here.
Hi, John.
Got it. Good. You're here. Nice to hear your voice, Jay.
Nice to hear yours as well. Can you hear me all right?
Very, very well.
All right. We got you. We got each other. We made it happen through arbitrarily shifting zones of time that we've set up for ourselves.
Absolutely.
I'm already recording, so let's just consider ourselves having just begun, okay?
Okay, so we're on. Fine.
We're on. This is it. This is it. And I'll share with you something, and perhaps it'll get us going in a good way, because honestly, if it had been anyone else that had scheduled to do this with me today, and had we not had already logistical issues trying to coordinate and I didn't want to cancel, I might have canceled, because it's been a kind of difficult week in a certain ways. But I would have canceled if I felt like I really, really needed to, and I didn't, because it was you. And I thought, you know what? Of all the people I might be able to get into a conversation, even when I'm not feeling the most inspired, because I remember last time we spoke, my sense was, and it was just a first impression, you might have even said as much, that you're someone who has spent time on the dark side or whatever, you know?
Yes.
And I guess also because I don't really know your age, but I do think you're a bit older than I am.
That's true.
And I think that I got back from a trip at the beginning of this month. It was the first time I went on a trip in a long while, and I had these workshops in the UK and Ireland, and they went really well and was very uplifting. But when I got back, I just got slammed with just, the grind of life and just finances and government bureaucracy and just all of the inhumanity and injustice of the way that our society is.
Well, it would be wonderful if we could live our lives and every time we walk down the street, somebody said, well, that was amazing. Thank you. And isn't this work wonderful? But that's the reason why we do this stuff, is because of the very way you've just described it. Life can be shit, and we're all dealing with stuff all the time. And that, I think, will come up in our conversation this evening. And I think also when you're out there and you're doing stuff with groups of people, there's a certain amount of exposure that's necessary to get the best out of yourself. And then when you're open like that, and when all the groups have gone home and the insights have been done, and there you are back in your life again, then sometimes even the other stuff can feel even worse than it is. I mean, it's a difficult time at the moment, I think, for a lot of people.
I guess that was what I was going to ask. I think sometimes I feel like that. It feels like a difficult time. But I also don't know if that's true for other people or not. And I guess in particular, yoga teachers, are there other people who are able to make enough money? And how are they doing it?
Well, I think we've got to stop training yoga teachers.
Yeah.
I mean, with respect and love, and teaching yoga is a wonderful thing to do. Like you, I've been doing it for many, many years. And I wouldn't change it for anything. But it can be difficult for many people. I mean, you see people going into training courses and they're kind of getting the hang of it. And what are they going to do with it? Perhaps they're not going to do very much with it. Perhaps they're not going to teach. Perhaps they're going to use it for their own understanding and may teach a couple of small groups a week. But I think the expectation of making a living out of it these days is not quite the same as it was 30 or 40 years ago.
I guess that you saying that confirms what seems to be true. I mean, I started 20 to 30 years ago instead of 30 to 40 years ago. And it certainly has been true since I started to what the situation is now. And I guess to your point about teacher training, I guess sometimes what happened is teacher training just became yoga education. And yes. I think that there is a bit of a reckoning that's happening in terms of people having some kind of expectation about what doing yoga teacher training means and whether or not you could have any kind of career as a yoga teacher, whatever that means.
Well, people are also looking for ways of putting new slants on it. So if I become a yoga teacher and if I want to stamp my individuality on that because it's coming through me, then I might find something to align with it. If you look up what different kinds of yoga is going on, I mean, it's just extraordinary. They're all offshoots. They're all branches. They're all, sometimes people need to do that because everybody wants to be different. Everybody's an individual. Interesting. I was looking at the word individuality. And if you take off the beginning of the word and the end of the word, you have the word divide without the E. So we're all, and I was going to talk this evening about division and indivisibility as well with you. So basically everybody needs an identity, even though yoga says that it's not about identification. The world would be a really boring place if we weren't individuals. We'd all be married to the same person. So it's interesting because really when you get down to it, and looking at the way we can feel if we're having a downtime, or even if we're having an uptime, or anywhere in the middle, and it's an overused soundbite, but there is only one yoga, and everybody does what they do with that, and that's basically about. And for me, when I'm low, and those times, or if life's a bit difficult, it's interesting. The digging deeper tends to happen spontaneously. And it doesn't change the circumstances, as we all know, but it changes one's perspective. And that's what I think is probably one of the most important elements, that you can't change your circumstances to that degree, but you can change your perspective. And, if there were no emotions, everything would be fine. If we weren't aware of our emotions, everything might be a little bit better, but we are. And when we practice and we do certain things and we release tension and we put ourselves on the line with other people, it's a big responsibility, then, the emotions are always there. And sometimes the deeper, the stuff beneath the emotions that many of us get in touch with, not necessarily by doing anything. I mean, the funny thing is that there's always this impression that something has to be done.
Yes, like you're going to clear the energy passageway,
or you're
going to, you're going to do the thing. And, to one other thing you said about that perspective shifting, I think I was just having a conversation the other day with some other teachers, and we were talking about how you can observe in a yoga class that moment where it feels like there's this shift, like an energy shift that can happen in a class.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's kind of what you're describing, because when we were trying to find words of what that was, it wasn't just like emotions, but it could have been, but it was like an energy shift of sorts, or it could be a shift in perspective that's happening, Right. Also, wait a second. I want to ask you something else, because you said there's only one yoga. And I think I know what you meant there, but I also just, like, before this, people will hear this, I recorded an episode with someone named Philip Dislep. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's somebody who's done like a lot of research and I guess reporting of sorts on Yogi Bhajan and 3HO. And, we had a conversation about people talking about what they teach and where it comes from, and kind of like making claims to its ancientness or its provenance or whatever, and how much of a lot of stuff is made up. And it made me think about our last conversation, which was just at the beginning of this year, which feels like a lot longer, honestly. But you and I were talking about intuition. And I was really appreciating that you were willing to kind of admit how much of what yoga teachers do is a matter of intuition. And I guess so when you say there's only one yoga, do you have like where is that coming from? Is that coming from your experience and your observations, or a particular source that you base that claim on?
Well, it depends. What do you do? When we're talking about there's only one yoga, are we talking about applications? Because when you're talking about different yoga and people take yoga and do yoga and there's different kinds of yoga, these are all applications. They're all external.
Right. And there are lots of different approaches or schools or styles.
Of course. Yeah. You know this. You've interviewed.
But they're not all teaching the same thing. What I mean is some people teach like a philosophical viewpoint. We might have even talked about this last time you were here, about like a transcendent viewpoint where you're trying to get somewhere or you become something, as opposed to like a more non-dual, like there's different ideas about what yoga is and what practice is for. So when you say there's only one yoga, that implies that all these different approaches are all leading to the same thing. And I don't know.
They're all condensations. They're all formations. Even the transcendent approach is a formation that has to be passed through, as far as I can see. So in one way, opening the back of the waist is something you pass through, which may set your mind up for something larger, in the same way that an insight does the same thing. And I wrote down this evening, actually, I was thinking about this session, and I was just laid down on my back and did a little bit of breathing and just let go. And that insightfulness, the condition of being insightful, is more relevant and more essential than the insights that come out of it. And that the condition of understanding as a way of being is more essential than what we happen to be understanding. And so that when we're teaching, what we're inviting people, if we're getting down to the roots of yoga, from my perspective, when we're teaching, whatever wonderful times people have, and we're inviting people to get in touch with their own insightfulness and their own condition of understanding. And as they release tension along the way and become more healthy, and of course people get attached to, last week when I came, it was amazing. I've never felt my leg like I felt it, and I've never felt my diaphragm like I felt it. Great. Fabulous. People get very seduced by pleasant sensations, and so they should, because it keeps them going. But the further down you get, and the further in you get, which comes from listening, which you know very well, and I'm not making any distinction between yoga and meditation or this, that, and the other. They're all applications, and they're fabulous applications because they make people feel better. But as time goes by, and the depth happens by itself, as you pass through ever finer sensations, whether it's fascia or pulsations, or as you go deeper and deeper into the body and refine your sensitivity, that sensitivity is obviously taken up by the mind and consciousness because they're inseparable. You find yourself passing through the emotions and beyond the ideas and beyond the thoughts. We know all that. And I'm interested at the moment, Jay, in constance, with a TS at the end, constance, as an approach. Gravity is.
What do you mean by that? What are constants?
Something that's indivisible, that's related to our existence. So gravity is indivisible. If we're looking for indivisibility,
meaning that we're not floating up, so we know that there's something holding us to the earth.
Well,
there's gravity.
Gravity's there. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for gravity. I'm not necessarily talking about a sensory experience, although it is a sensory experience, but you can't
divide. It's like when you're talking about Vanda and she does the grounding, right? Like the grounding. Right, it's like the contact betwing your feet and the floor means there's some force holding you to the floor.
Yes, but it's
a constant. You can take a moment to observe it at any given moment.
Absolutely. It's a constant, and it's there, right? Okay, so that's one. It's indivisible, because if people are looking to heal their fragmentations, and we're all fragmented. Thinking is fragmented. The mind is dancing from one mood to the next, this, that, and the other. Whatever we do, it comes back. If we're trying to make some contribution to our own sanity and our own health, we want to address that fragmentation, and we want to be able to notice it. So a lot of it is to do with noticing. We need to become more sensitive to it. Gravity is one. Indivisibility. Space is another one. We've got space within us, space around us. We're 99% space, and so on. Silence is also indivisible, because all sound, basically, the foundation of sound is total silence. I'm talking about silence of the mind. Energy, even though the physicists, modern physicists, and I was talking to one the other day, they break up energy in different forms. But basically, as far as we're concerned, and as far as the yogis, as far as I can see, are concerned, there's only really one energy. It's all coming from one energy, so that's also indivisible. And presence is indivisible. However we're feeling, however good or bad or indifferent things are, presence is also indivisible. So, and there's more. So if we focus on those things as an approach, however one may find a way of doing that, then basically immediately from the beginning, one is at least making a contribution to the way we are and can be and trying to change things. So, and then all those things come together. And for me at the moment, the most essential thing I think is probably silence, because silence invites me to listen. And when I'm listening, I don't know anything. I can't know anything. I've got no experience as a teacher. When I'm listening, I'm completely open to what comes up in the moment. You know this. And it's a very beautiful way of spending time with the group. And it doesn't mean that one shouldn't engage with postures or exercises or the rest of it, but start with silence.
Just to clarify, when you say silence, you mean the signpost of a calming of vrittis or something? Because, like, I like the idea that listening associates with silence, but generally listening involves, like, you're hearing something, which some people would think of as not silent.
Yes.
And even I would also add, frankly, like, I've been suffering a bit from tinnitus.
Yeah.
So I hear a lot of ringing in my ears, and it's like, oh, that's silent?
Yeah.
So what you're talking about is not just the sounds necessarily.
No,
right?
Not the sound. I'm talking about the mind, the silence of the mind. I'm talking about the thoughts.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, and that can't come from the students, because the students wouldn't know, perhaps some of them wouldn't know what you're talking about. How can I switch off and all the rest of it? So the silence begins with the teacher.
And that's the presencing that you're talking about. You said something else. You said a state of insightfulness. And
the condition of insight that comes with silence. If your mind is busy or active, or even if it's busily active on the approach you may be using in a yoga class, it can't be insightful. Because you said, what did you say to me? You wrote me an email here. I've got it in front of me, actually.
Oh, I think I was talking about virtuosic improvisatory moments.
Yes. That make yoga about transformation rather than information.
Yes.
That's what you said. And I like that. And
that's what you mean, like that state of insightfulness is what is the territory for virtuosic improvisatory moments.
It's the fertile ground.
Yeah.
And so is the condition of understanding. And if you're understanding something, an insight is a condensation of intelligence, basically releasing itself. It's your unblocking intelligence when you have an insight. And then it's out there. And then you might write it down, or your students come up and said, when you said that and when you said this. So then it becomes a thing. And then it's useless because it's gone. Do you see what I mean? You can't use it. You can't use an insight. It's actually in the moment, and it adds to one's understanding and one's condition. It goes into the soup, but you can't use it. I remember being at a Shambhala Center in Scotland many years ago, doing a workshop for a week. It was lovely. And I went into their library, and their library was like 3 walls, because one wall had a door in it, 3 walls. It was high ceilings of books on meditation and yoga, and written by Eastern people that had been translated, written by German guys and Scandinavian guys and American guys that had gone to the East and put their own slant on it, and come back and written books and all the rest of it, all saying the same thing. You know, it's the same in America. When I was in Boston teaching a while ago, I went to one of the bookstores, I think it was in Brookline, a lovely bookstore, and the section on yoga was absolutely vast. I've never seen so many books on yoga. So basically, all that information, which you're talking about when you emailed me, make yoga about transformation rather than information. But people love information about transformation.
Well, let me interject for a second. That bit about information or transformation rather than information also came from another conversation I had here on this show where we're talking about teacher training. And me and my friend Joe were kind of basically admitting that a lot of the time that a lot of the material that was being presented in these 200-hour trainings, like people don't even really need that information isn't even really useful a lot of the times to most of the people who are having to take tests on it, and wanting to get away from feeling like we just need to give people all this information, even though that might not be information that they actually need or is, again, useful.
Filling up the course.
Yeah.
Let's fill it up. They haven't had this. Let's give them that. Well, basically, I mean, you just, I haven't run any teacher training courses, so-called training for many years. And I think if I do work with a lot of teachers. I just had a workshop down here where I live. And they were mainly teachers, even though it wasn't advertised for teachers, but a lot of teachers came. And I haven't taught live for about 3.5 years since COVID. I've been working online a lot. Mm-hmm. And I was made aware of first of all, how wonderful a live group is because of the energy in the room. But also, what was it that I was trying to do with these people?
Exactly.
Was I trying to impose my knowledge on them? I was definitely sharing my experience with them. But I didn't see any distinction between myself and them. And it was a lot to do with the energy in the room. And there's certain things that we all share. We all share gravity. We all share presence. We all share everything, basically, all those things that we talk about. And it was a very successful day. And when I was thinking about it, running it through my mind the following day, I realized I was just coming back to the same point all the time. And it's a word that I used to feel uncomfortable using, because who am I to use such a word with my background and my struggles and all the rest of it, we've all been through it. And that word is existence. And I'm very comfortable with that word now at my age. I think it's a fabulous, fabulous word. And when you pare everything back and you get right down into the bottom of the bucket and you pass through existence is immovable. It has no agenda, and we can feel it. We can feel it in our bodies. We are a sensory consequence of existence. So if the nerve endings that we feel supplying the skin and the spine and the breath and all the rest of it, every sensation that we have is a consequence of existence. So why not take those sensations? Why not take that sensitivity that we're experiencing and that is helping us? And if we want to get right back to the bottom of things and start again, which for me is potentially an answer for how we might transform. If you're going to transform, don't start halfway back. Don't start with bits and pieces and then try and put them together. Don't over-inform. But as you pare it back, you get right back to the beginning of everything, which we have with us. And we are the conscious, if you like, the conscious representative of existence, so the yogis say. Why not go right back to the feeling of existence? Well, how does that feel? It actually feels immovable. It's not emotional. It doesn't mind. It doesn't care. It's free from everything that we've imposed on this planet and everything we've imposed on ourselves and others. Life isn't easy. And that's where I've been. And these constants of existence, like gravitation.
Like your inhale where it all started, right?
Yes, exactly. And and the thing is, can you feel it? Ultimately people begin to talk about existence and the nature of existence. All the gurus spoke about it and all the rest of it. How does it feel in the body? Because the body is the representative of existence, the organic representative. Here we are. We're present. So that's the bottom line. And out of that, you can make of that whatever you wish.
Well, there's a lot to make of it. I mean, I would say that this state of insightfulness, and you said something very interesting that we kind of need to go back to, maybe about how like that experience that people have. And I think I know what you're referring to. Like there's like, once it's done, it happened. It went into the soup of somebody's experience. There's nothing to do about it or nothing to do with it after. It was about being in that moment and having that experience between us or in yourself, you know?
Well, the word experience means to know by direct perception. That's the word experience. So that's why personal experience is so important. You can lead people. I mean, the word experience, expert, all the rest of it, there's all coming from the same source. There's no experts really. But the word experience comes from, is defined as to know through direct perception. So that's where the sensitivity comes in. So I don't see us as teachers. I don't see us as educators. I see us as awakeners. And for somebody to awaken, what are you? Oh, I'm an awakener. Okay, what does that mean?
Yes, I have to say, awakener. That's a new one. I haven't heard that one before. What do you mean by that?
Right, and to awaken people, people can only awaken themselves because they have to receive the information. We're awakeners and we're also observers. So the philosophical side comes in through the observations, and also the observations can awaken you if they're incisive enough. But also the awakening comes through the applications. Somebody's tense, they're full of tension. They need to get their bodies in a different way. They need to find the bottom of their breath. They need to start letting go of stuff. They need to start listening, whatever they need to do, whatever the mix is. So we teach, we teach applications in order so that people can become awakened and become more sensitive. So therefore, in becoming more sensitive, they're becoming more insightful, and they can slip into the condition of understanding.
See, that's it. It's this idea of it. You're finding words that I point to something that I've been really thinking quite a bit about. This slip into the understanding, and I'll give you an example from my own personal body. And I was just talking about this on the podcast this week, as a matter of fact, because I had all these people come on to talk about different ideas about how to align your spine or different kinds of ways of moving the body for optimal purposes or whatnot. All these different ideas that I was working with on my body that in a way made matters worse because it was kind of like an idea that I was trying to impose on my body. And then I just started wearing these barefoot shoes and I had to walk differently. And I learned a lot more, and all these other kinds of changes happened because I was just like a natural thing that I was slipping into because I had to, because I was walking or whatever.
It's the same with the mind.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm getting at.
Yes, exactly.
So like that idea of getting someone's mind to slip into certain states of insightfulness is like that, right? Like you can't just think your way there.
No, it's also to be more comfortable. You put those shoes on and you felt more comfortable. So what is a comfortable mind? Is yoga about, asana, doesn't the word asana mean a comfortable place to sit or something like that? What is it? So doesn't one want a kind of comfortable mind? And we slip into, as time goes by, at first I think people come to yoga and they think, well, fabulous experience. I can breathe better. I'm not losing my temper with my husband so much as I was, even though the possibility is still there. People's behavior begins to change to some extent, and their physiological health begins to change, sometimes big time. The one isn't necessarily a guarantee for the other. Total physiological health, whatever that is not necessarily a ticket to peace of mind. Over extended periods, that takes something else, and I think that takes something. I think that's connected to something we have no control over, and I think that's also connected to the unknown. And the other thing I was going to say was that there's two unknowns, as far as I can see. Perhaps there's more. One is the unknown that Krishnamurti talks about all the time. Freedom from the known, which is actually to do with your past and your previous experience. And have a family and see how you get on with that. Have an infant with a high temperature in the middle of the night and see how that kind of philosophy pans out. I mean, you're pretty advanced to deal with that in a very, very peaceful way, but nevertheless, wonderful stuff. So,
I mean, that kind of is an interesting thing, goes to the original point we started with, that like, there's the kind of practical realities of living in the world. And I guess when it comes to being a yoga teacher, I guess that's the stickier thing. And it even goes back to this idea of yoga teacher training and what exactly you're training someone to do. If you're just training someone to lead asana sequences, that's one thing. But what you're talking about applications just being like this thing that you're utilizing, but actually those applications are only there so much or so good for as they lead to these improvisations or these improvisational spaces. And I really like the way you describe it, because that was exactly what happened to me in my recent trip, where I didn't feel comfortable doing what I've done in the past, which would be to kind of like prepare more of a performance for everybody in a way.
Yeah.
And I felt like you felt like what's most appropriate right now is that we're coming together on this more mutual ground, like you were describing, where I'm not this like knowledge holder who knows all the wisdom and has all the insight. It's a Sangha thing that we're doing together.
Yes.
That's really going to lead to this insight that we're tapping into.
Right. There's no past. If you, as you say, when you go fully prepared for something, or you think you're going to do this, that, or the other, well, there may be a little bit of that. But wisdom has no past. I mean, you can be wise, obviously. So an old person can have the wisdom of life experience. That's a kind of wisdom about things. What am I going to do? How can I do this? How can I earn a living? Well, you might get some advice from an older person, not necessarily. But the wisdom that we're talking about is across the board. And it's the kind of wisdom that is present and the kind of insightfulness that is present when our conditioning begins to dissolve. And I think that's where I was going just now with that, about the gripping points that we have. And how, you have them, I have them. There isn't anybody that doesn't have them, because there's one of our biggest fears, it seems to me, is probably our fear of abandonment. And the way we deal with that, may well be to build up a little store of identifications. So we're always referring to ourselves with this kind of reinforcing our identity, which protects us, and we need to be protected about this fear of abandonment. But if if you and I were on a retreat together somewhere, and with or without students, a few people, a few teachers, and there's a few of us, and we had 10 days or something like that, and then we'd have the opportunity to get into the feeling more and more and more and more of what we're talking about. We've all had similar experiences on taking people away for retreats and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I remember reading about what they call temporary autonomous zones or whatever, where you remove yourself from all your usual identifiers.
Absolutely.
So that you can create a temporary space where you're not so defined by all that stuff.
Right, but then but the identification is still there, because
you got to go back. You got to go back after the 10 days or whatever.
But the identification of being there is still there.
Yeah.
Even though you feel amazing, you're going to find some way of filling it up with identification. So the yoga masters knew that people, it seems to me, to really get down to the bottom of stuff, and it's not for everybody, as you say, we've got to, life to live. But along the way, the real transformation, which is how this conversation started about formation and transformation, is to dissolve all formations as they come up. And I'll mention Krishnamurti again, because I've heard you have conversations about him and with people that have spent time with him, and we've all read his books. And in some ways, it's almost unpalatable, because his his requirement is so extreme in one way.
Yeah, some people don't like him. They just think he's a word salad. But some people are like, it's like your mind explodes.
Yeah, well, I know, but I think he was pretty cool myself. And,
me too. I think he was amazing. Yeah,
I thought he was pretty amazing, and it's just that he was. Well, when you see him, I remember I've seen a few videos of him, and when he's sitting, sometimes or when he's in a conversation, he looks like he's in meditation. I mean, he looks like he's actually in that state of meditation. Now, how you could deal with certain things in that state, I don't know. But
that's interesting that you're pointing. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's interesting that you're pointing to Krishnamurti because, in a way, like, where was he getting those streams of like descriptions and insights from? Like, he was probably doing what you're describing, which was somehow he was able to be in a state of this insightfulness.
Yeah, and then he would come out of it to produce his insights, his condensations were insights about life when he was talking to people. People were asking him questions, and then the next minute he was in a process of letting go from moment to moment. So he'd say something which was, well, that was amazing. What did he just say? And then somebody would respond to that. And his response to their response was to say, "Don't cling to it; it's gone." So his mind was always moving, and at the same time he had a kind of immovability to him, I think, and I think that's what I'm referring to when I'm talking about the feeling of existence. And I think the quantum physicists, which are everybody's talking about them at the moment. Quantum physics and quantum this and quantum that.
The new quantum computing is going to change everything.
Yeah. What is quantum computing? No, I don't think so.
I just saw some kind of documentary about this stuff where there's like this new sort of computer where instead of it being just zeros and ones, it can be a 0 or a 1 at the same time, and basically like one thing can be in two different places at the same time, basically, in computing.
That is, I suppose that's quantum physics. Nothing to do with AI, I suppose.
I don't know, but it's hard to tell. Yes, it might have something to do with it. I don't know. But I mean, in theory, it's what you're saying, that there can be like non-local or one thing can be in two different places at the same time, whether that's, I think that's what you're pointing to.
Okay, well, yes, there's two things that come out of that, what you just said. One is two things being in the same place at the same time, different places at the same time. I think in yogic terms, that may be to do with a very sophisticated, very sensitive field of awareness, which we deal with. I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a physicist. I just do my own practice like you do and see what comes up. That's a possibility. But the other thing that came up for me, I think I mentioned AI, which is artificial intelligence. Well, we've got our own AI, and that's authentic intelligence. And that's where the individual comes in. But again, the individual expressing what's coming through from somewhere else. So I was talking about two unknowns. One was the unknown that Krishnamurti talks about. So we went off and we spoke about him for a few moments. But then, of course, the other unknown is something that you've never known and never will know, and it is also unknowable. And we do know about it. It's a feeling. That's another feeling that we have, which for me, in my practices, which are very simple these days, the counterbalance for the absolutely unknown, which I think you had a conversation with Pete Blackerby, and you also mentioned it in a conversation with me, with a few people. You were very interested in what do we mean by God a while ago, and I think you mentioned it in a few of your conversations.
Well, quite a few, yes.
Quite a few in your conversations. So you were very interested in that. And so if we look upon that as an unknown, there's nothing wrong with it being unknown. In fact, I think when something is unknown, it's very useful, because what it tends to do, if you like, sublimate the known, damp down, everything we know and all this information. You can't have any information about the unknown, but the unknown may be the place where transformation occurs, and the unknown may be a dimension. Because a dimension is not only a space that is measured in physics, it's also to do with a way of considering things. So yoga is a dimension. So, and they spoke about this. You may be more familiar with the Sanskrit and what everybody said through the centuries than I am. But I think that this whole thing of the unknown is another constant.
That was going to be my question. That's going to be my question. Because, if God is authentic intelligence, let's say, so if God is authentic intelligence, you're saying that it's a constant.
Yes.
But it's also an unknown. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's supported by existence, which is immovable.
All right, but if yes, I'm sure a bunch of people are like, what? Listening to this, like, what are they talking about? I mean, I'm following in the sense that we're talking around it a little bit, in that, there's this idea that there's an authentic intelligence, which is what we're tapping into when we cultivate a state of insightfulness as a teacher, which is why too much information or making your teaching about information starts to feel inadequate or not helpful.
It's an overload.
Yeah, it's kind of starts to get in the way.
Totally.
But people want the information, as you said.
They have to have it. Otherwise, they think they don't know anything. They think you can't tell
it's
people.
In the way a lot of the time.
Yes, but it's again, it's a balance, isn't it? I mean, people have to know if you're running, or are you talking about training teachers, or are you talking about students? What are you talking about?
I'm talking about training teachers. I'm talking about yoga in general, because if we're talking about yoga not being physical fitness or just exercise, and maybe that is what for a lot of people, but we're talking about what you're talking about yoga is in a state of an insightfulness and about perception.
Yeah.
then it's an obstacle. It's why it's like, if I would just do some fucking handstand workshops, I'd make a lot more money, you know?
Let's do some.
You know what I'm saying? So we're talking about authentic intelligence and states of insightfulness, and I'm with you on that. But people are coming, they want to know about asana alignment. And so how do we get from that?
Well, how do you, well, it depends how strongly you feel about it, and it depends how meaningful it is to you. And I mean, for me to do a handstand workshop, I think I'd die of boredom. So I'd hand that over to somebody else.
I can't do it.
No, absolutely. So basically, you see, I think, it's an interesting time, isn't it? Yeah. Because there's so many yoga teachers.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.